Thanks everyone. Thank you for again inviting me here today to present to all of you. And I'm going to be talking today about my PhD research, doctoral research, which I'm currently in the middle of. So the process is I'm at Northumbria University, in the UK, and my research is with children who live in an informal settlement in an area in Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya. So for my research, I apply a child-centred approach to understand the hazards and risks children are exposed to in their daily lives. And this is all from their own perspective. And I also explore the risk communication methods that these children use and the barriers that they may face when communicating these. And so I chose to use this photo on the front here to show the children receiving their certificates of participation at the end of the research. Just thought it was good to demonstrate this is a way to demonstrate to them how significant their voices were to this research process and how they can also be agents of change. So this presentation really is going to talk about children's voices and a bit about the literature and everything behind it and the importance of children featuring more in research. And then I'll go on to about the field work I've done and the initial analysis, because that's where I'm at. So the impact of disasters on children are vast. Approximately 25 to 30% are injured in disasters. Up to 175 million are affected by disasters in the 10 years between 2006 and 2016. Critically, these numbers are predicted to triple in the future due to factors such as climate change. As Twig here rightly states, it cannot be overemphasized the importance of giving a voice to the most vulnerable in disasters. And with children and youth representing more than half the world's population, they stand to benefit the most from the reduction of risk and impact of disasters. The impacts children face are on their physical and mental health, their nutritional needs, access to education, economic opportunities, exposure to violence, as well as many other limiting side effects. And those living in poverty face even bigger risks, such as the children in this research. Therefore, it's critical their needs are met and contributions are heard and integrated into disaster risk reduction efforts. And this is therefore upholding their rights as children, which I'll come on to now. So some global policies that do or don't feature children in DRR as well. So there was the landmark event for children's rights, which was in 1989. This was called the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this recognised children's rights through 57 different articles. And the ones that speak to this research include the right to be heard, the right to freedom of expression, and the right to health and health services. The Sendai framework also lacks a certain focus on children, I feel. There's a small section where it mentions children as agents of change, where they're given space to contribute to disaster risk reduction in the role of stakeholders, but it's really not clear what capacity this is in. The Sustainable Development Goals, however, feature children much more widely, and there's 12 out of the 17 indicators that do directly relate to children, such as good health and well-being, quality education, clean water, sanitation. So listening and hearing children's voices in this research and more widely can lead to many positive outcomes, such as empowering them as agents of change, giving them the space for self-expression to express themselves, revealing their unique perspectives on what's happening around them, and also listening to their local knowledge, which is really important for them and us to hear. The other next aspect of my research is to assess the hazards and risk environment that these children are living in through the children's own experiences and perspectives. So this child-centred, so CCDRR, is the child-centred disaster risk reduction approach. The acronym, and this is used to deeply and authentically explore these hazards and risks from, again, the perception of a child, so not this adult perception. The solutions to challenges they are facing and the effective methods to communicate these risks are also explored in this research with the children. So in terms of perception, to fully understand a child's perspective and their perception of risk, research really needs to be conducted with children, not on them. And this moves away from the traditional form of the adult-centric approach. The knowledge remains here there's a lack of knowledge concerning children's perspectives due to people feeling there's obstacles in the way, the sensitivity of the subject, and also the complexity of methodologies that can be required to engage children with risk communication. However, this is, I feel, something my research has challenged because of the success of the methodology, which I will come on to, and you'll see. So in terms of definitions of hazards in particular, which is kind of the part I'm at in the research, this again was explored using the child-centered approach. So on the right here, the UNDRR have produced a really great document, the Hazards Information Profiles. It outlines 302 hazards globally, and they're always reviewing it. It is a really extensive research document. However, I really have struggled to fit in the hazard definitions from the children into this categories outlined here. So the ones they were talking to me are really struggling where to fit them into these global categorizations. So how can their definitions feed into big policies like this, or do they need to be treated separately? So in terms of risk communication, once the children's individual perception of risks are understood in this research process, the risk assessment and the pathways of how they can communicate these risks have been explored. Taking this out into the wider community, children's voices can be heard through greater support and awareness of their needs from the adults and communities in their lives. Buona et al. States there does need to be this bottom-up and the top-down approach to ensure everyone in the whole process is listened to and the plans are implemented. So in terms of networks for risk communication, generally a child's role in this is underestimated within both the formal and the informal risk communication networks. And children can be much better placed to reach vulnerable groups with the risk messages due to their unique positioning within the family and their generally natural networking abilities. Children also have a greater capacity, a real willingness and opportunities to absorb new information compared to some certain adults. So this research explored their own personal and individual networks and how they can be effective for communicating risks. And then looking at the solutions to hazards and risks, the adults might have children's best interest at heart, and I'm sure they do. However, this can differ from the child's perspective of what really is the best solution for them. Again, further exacerbating this uneven power relationship, which can be triggered by the difference in the age and authority. The philosophy of participation recognises the expertise and contributions of participants, like the children. And this enables them to explore their own solutions in their lives and how they experience it. So this other picture of here, this other document is called Words into Action, again produced by UNDRR, a really great example of inclusivity of children within DRR. And there's many successful projects which are child-led and child-centred. So the third aspect of my research, before I get on to what I've done in the field, is participatory creative methods. So I've analysed these, I've used these as well, and why they've been so successful. So they place children at the heart of the methodology, and it views them as active participants throughout the whole research process. The methods are carefully chosen to ensure children engage with the activities and felt inspired to speak freely and truthfully about their experiences of the hazards and risks in their lives. So this research harnessed the participants' skills and their experiences through these methodologies and aimed to understand and reduce the risks for the children. So aspects of the child-centered approach, such as reflexivity, engaging children as co-researchers, are really significant in creating a safe environment in which the children can have these meaningful contributions to disaster risk reduction. These images here are two examples of engaging methods. The first on the left of the two photos is a project I was involved with in Kenya, in Nairobi, using puppetry as a risk communication tool to discuss infectious diseases and hand washing with soap. This is actually a huge part of the rationale for my own PhD research, which followed after the successful project of this. And the second is a series of books produced by COPE, aimed at children and produced with children, providing a really accessible form of disaster education for them. However, in the wider field, generally children and young people's participation remains one of the most ignored and infringed upon of all of the rights in the UN Convention of the Right to the Child document. There still remains a clash between the child's need for protection and the rights of their participation. The barriers can be systemic and include lack of funding and limited recognition of the importance of children's views. So now I'll come on to the fieldwork. So here are the research participants. They're 36 children who attend a primary school within the Kawangware informal settlement, and this is one of the largest in Nairobi city. They were aged between 10 to 14, and I made sure to maintain a gender balanced representation among them, and I kept the groups single gendered when we were discussing them. So we had 6 different groups of 6 children. And then a priority throughout this research working with children is to ensure confidentiality for them and the data that's been generated, making sure their words are safeguarded and their opinions are kept in a secure manner. So here are the methods that I used on the first field trip, that they'll kind of come together anyway, to show the creative arts-based methods and how they were so successful in engaging the children in their own hazard and risk environment. So I won't have time to go into much detail about them all, but see what we can do. So I began with the icebreaker, asking children to draw something they see on their way to school, keeping it quite open, and they could draw anything. This revealed much more about the children than I expected, linking a lot to risks that they had encountered. As seen here, this child drew their experience of actually witnessing someone being kidnapped on their way to school. So one of the key approaches applied was the use of mapping techniques. So you can see number 2, 4, and 5 are actually the mapping. And these provided great insights into the hazards in their school and actually in their neighbourhood as well, directly from their experiences, how they experienced and where they experienced these. So they mapped their school hazards as a group, so number 2, and then the neighbourhood, they actually mapped these individually, and I asked them to draw the hazards they experienced on their way to school, from their home to school. And then following these exercises, they always describe their work, so it's a draw and tell exercise, and that's where you hear all these captivating stories of the encounters with these hazards, and that's where the real details come out, and it's their voice about the hazards. In addition to mapping, the children and I conducted walking interviews around the school, so number 3 there, and these are really insightful walks. The children were very keen to point out hazards they observed or actually had mostly experienced firsthand, and this exercise generated additional hazards to the mapping, and these are then added onto the map when they returned to the classroom. So being a real iterative activity. And then a short wellbeing exercise was conducted, which is number 4, where they added wellbeing spaces onto the school map they had produced. The green stickers were areas of positive wellbeing where they felt safe and happy, and red stickers are negative wellbeing. And there were many, many, many more red stickers than green stickers in the school environment, indicating the state of their wellbeing. And then finally, the modelling clay was used, number 6, to create mini models of people and hazards they described in their stories. So this was actually a story about me. I am that person in the front there. And these were scooters, motorbikes that I was kidnapped on and taken to that little hut in the back. But this approach added a sense of fun for them and also provided a therapeutic outlet for expression, allowing children to use their hands to shape their narratives. Then I move on to the second field trip, which was much more about risk assessment, risk perception, and risk communication. So moving on from having all the hazards then defined, we then explore how they become risks. So I used a risk matrix, which is number 7, as a systematic tool to evaluate how they perceived the hazards as risks. So they were categorized to low, medium, or high from the children's viewpoints. Most of the risks were grouped as a high likelihood and a high consequence. We concluded that these were very high risks. So the bottom right square is where lots of them ended up. Then I did a body mapping exercise with one group of girls to delve deeper into the impact of what these hazards are on their overall well-being. So this technique provided a visual means for the children to express and illustrate the physical and emotional effects of the hazards on their bodies and their mental health. The children then drew self-portraits and mapped out their personal networks around these. The exercise aimed to identify the individuals within their own networks and who they trusted to talk to share information about hazards and risks. And I was also really keen to place them at the centre of this exercise to show that they're at the centre and they've got people around them and how can they be supported. And then I finally explored how these risks are communicated within the networks. And this exposed quite a few challenges that they face and barriers when they try and share information. So I'm just going to come on to some initial findings finally. As I said, I'm very much in the middle of this right now. So it's maybe in a few months I might have more. So I've been analysing the hazards part of this research, and then I'm going to be coming on to looking more about the risk perception soon, which is also incredibly interesting. But this is more about the hazards and the methods themselves. So I have found that these creative methods that you've just seen played a pivotal role to engage the children and really uncovered their unique perspectives and their realities on the hazards and risks in their environment. I feel like this research showed that you don't need to be an expert to use these methods. I didn't feel like I was a particular expert to engage them. And I really hope this is something I can share with other partners, such as NGOs, who sometimes shy away from participatory action research methods. This research showed the power of storytelling. It really is a powerful tool, and it again allows us to gain insights into these hazards and risks from the children's perception and their lived experiences. So this is how they would talk about the risks in lots of stories and anecdotes. They're incredibly powerful, moving. Found most of the hazards related to health and well-being, both physical health and mental well-being. Establishing trust is a crucial element when working with children to unveil their true opinions on these hazardous events. And also the researcher, myself, played a key role in being able to foster this trust through, I think these participatory methods really help to do that, and also constantly maintaining that ethical position and being wary of that. So there's been some categorization of hazards that I've done. As I said earlier, that they're quite different or they don't quite fit into the UN ones. The larger categories are fairly similar. So in terms of the neighbourhood, it's environmental, structural risks and community interactions that act as hazards. And in the school, there's risk and safety relating to insecure boundaries, like broken perimeter fences, which allow external threats, so people, strangers, to come into the school and creating quite serious hazards. The physical infrastructure acting as hazards, poor sanitation and hygiene facilities, and interaction with peers and teachers in relation to violence. So as I mentioned briefly, there's various barriers that the children have talked about risk communication. I will come into this deeper when I do more analysis, but there's issues relating to trust of adults, children's perceived credibility, fear of this potential abuse within school, limited agency, the conformity to social norms, adherence to cultural practices, and the influence of societal communication pathways for them to actually communicate these risks. But again, I will be going into this deeper later on. And some cross-cutting themes in this hazard analysis have come out. So really, the children are experts in their own lives. They know what they've lived through, and therefore listening to them will reveal the real hazards that they're experiencing. The question of children's agency relating to their own health and safety, so how much can they talk about this and share? The normalisation of hazards by children and adults. So for me, some of them were like, well, that's shocking, but for them, it's very normalised to them. Lots of injuries and quite serious injuries ending up in hospital. The adult-child relations formed that influence their well-being, so feeling safe, being happy to talk to them or not. And then this level of awareness all the children have about their environment and how they really can foster their own solutions to the risks and have this real urge to fight for a better and healthier future. And the research has already led to some really positive, tangible improvements. So The reintroduction of soap in the school has happened, and they have a health club which has been reactivated as well. And the children emerged from this process feeling empowered as co-researchers. And they also developed new adaptive strategies, including the use of journaling to better cope with the risks they encountered, which was really lovely. And just one last point I wanted to make is through as positionality in research and recognizing this and how it can influence research in these particular contexts. So one example for me was becoming a mother in 2021 and noticing how small triggers could evoke large emotions. One detail being one of the children I worked closely with in this group has the same name as my own 2-year-old. Reminded me of how much I would miss my son whilst away from him, but secondly, how a child's life can be just so different just because of where you were born. I really hope this work and research helps to demonstrate how important it is to listen to children's voices and really signifies their own desires for change and to have a healthier future. Thank you for listening.